Welcome to episode 78 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on March 10th, 2022. I have an interview for you today with someone I've been wanting to talk to for quite a long time. Donna Estin, master hand knitter, designer, and VP of Public Relations for the Knitting Guild Association. I know many of you came to this podcast to learn more about the process of becoming a master hand knitter, and I took a hard right turn in my own process. So let's hear from someone who can fill us in on some of the details I haven't learned yet. First, many thanks to my lovely patrons, including Connie, my newest supporter. I very much appreciate your support. If you'd like to support the work I do here, please hop over to patreon.com/IthoughtIknewHow and check out some of the benefits you can receive as a patron. Another way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and kind review anywhere you listen to the show. Ratings and reviews are one of the things that make the show more visible in the search algorithm, so they are always appreciated. Before we get into the interview, I'd also like to thank Morehouse Farm and Knit New Haven for their sponsorship of these episodes. These lovely businesses do more than help pay the bills. They provide prizes for events and behind-the-scenes support as well. If you do not have a local yarn store, I cannot recommend Knit New Haven enough. Find them at knitnewhaven.com. And if you are looking for a supportive online learning community, MorehouseMerinoFlock.com is the place to be. Find both links in the show notes. Today, I am very happy to be bringing you an interview with Donna Estin. She is a lovely person to speak to. Her patterns range from confident beginner level to advanced, so she really designs for everyone, and she has an enthusiastic love for knitting. If you came to the podcast late and go back and listen to the early episodes, you might be surprised at the early intentions I had for this podcast. I originally was using this as a way to be accountable to myself as I went through the Knitting Guild Association's Master Hand Knitter program, and have since been led away from that intention by so many shiny things. The time I have spent on the program has been valuable, and despite the fact that forward progress in that program has paused/stopped, I maintain my membership with the Knitting Guild Association, and I appreciate Cast On, their monthly publication, as well as the archives that are available on the website. The Guild used to host in-person conferences that have since moved online and have been incredibly interesting events. There's another one coming up in April of 2022. I wanted to have Donna on to talk to those of you who are still curious about the Master Hand Knitter program, to share what her experience was like, to talk about her design experience, to fill us in on what we can expect at the Next Level Knitting Conference coming up April 22nd to 24th. Without further ado, here's my interview with Donna Estin, and I'll see you again on the other side. Donna, thank you again for speaking with me and my listeners today.
I'm so happy to be on your show.
Thanks. I always ask the same question when I know someone's a knitter, and that is if you could just tell us how you got started as a knitter.
Well, I learned to knit when I was a child, probably 8 or 9, and I really got into it when I was in high school. I love knitting sweaters, and I just have stuck with it all along. I like the fact that you're not just doing a hobby, you're being productive at the same time. So when I'm knitting, I'm creating something. So it takes a little bit of the guilt away. And I feel like when I started knitting, I really was self-taught. My mom sewed. So there was in the back corner of the fabric store, there was some yarn and knitting supplies and things. So I bought a bottle of yarn and some pink Susan Bates aluminum knitting needles and a how-to book. And I just taught myself. And I eventually got one reference book, which was June Hemmons' Hiatt Principles of Knitting. And if a pattern didn't tell me what I needed to learn, then I would look it up in the book. So between a pattern and that book, I would do my referencing and figure things out. And I got to a point where I just completely I used to knit in the winter and garden in the summer, but you know what? The weeds kept coming back. So I thought, forget this. I'm just going to knit year round.
Yeah, no weeds in knitting. That's wonderful. We might drop a stitch now and then, but we can fix that and move on. It doesn't come back to us.
It doesn't come back, no.
Well, your mention of June Hemmons Hiatt's book really leads us into what I want to talk to you about today. And that is your experience pursuing the Master Hand Knitter certification, because that is one of my favorite finds from my time starting off with the certification. Is what a wonderful reference that is. But how did you hear about the program and decide to pursue the certification?
Well, I had started designing and I really wanted to do this right. I really wanted to make a go of this. And I thought, well, I felt like I was an advanced knitter. I mean, I could knit any pattern. I had done cables and lace and stranded. So I felt comfortable with all of these different things. I just didn't know, no one had ever really looked at my knitting and critiqued it, or I had never taken any formal classes. So for me, I thought if I want to go into design, I want to make sure that I know what I'm doing. I want to make sure that my knitting is right, that my techniques are right, my pattern writing is right. So I signed up for the program and I thought that I was just going to breeze through this because I looked at it and thought, oh my gosh, these swatches are a piece of cake. I know how to do all of this. Well, it didn't really happen that way. I did move quickly through it, but a big part of the program I felt was getting yourself organized, working independently, doing the research and doing the references. And that whole reading, research, referencing tended to slow me down a little in the beginning. I thought I was just going to whip through some swatches. And what I learned was through the whole research process, I was sort of relearning the way I was doing things. I was finding better ways to do things. And there were some techniques that I had picked up along the way, which weren't necessarily the best way to do things. And so I slowed myself down and thought, with each swatch, let me do my research first. Let me get my references, find out how I want to do it. And I tried a lot of new techniques. I learned a lot through the process. So it didn't move as fast as I thought, but it was wonderful, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, when we start, we think along the same lines, oh, no sweat. I can just whip these out. No problem. There's, I think, is it 19 swatches in the first?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the first one. And none of them sound terribly complicated until you really have to focus on what you're doing. And you start, as you say, you start learning these new things to look out for and better ways to do it, for sure. After you knit your swatches and you answer your questions, you have to send in your work and have it critiqued, as you mentioned. How did that go for you?
There were some swatches that I struggled with. For the most part, I felt pretty confident. And again, I did the swatches last. So I did my research up front, got my references, applied what I learned in the research into the swatches and also into answering the questions. So that helped greatly. Mm-hmm. And when I sent everything in, it was so nerve-wracking because honestly, it was the first time I'd ever sent this off. And I knew master knitters were going to be looking at this and going through everything with a fine-tooth comb, which is good. That's what I wanted. But when it came back, there were a couple things that just totally threw me. For example, my basic stockinette swatch was rejected for tension issues. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I took the swatch, I looked at it, I didn't see it. I held it up to the light. I turned around, looked at it from the wrong side, and there it was. I had guttering right in the middle of it. And I just hadn't really paid attention before, but now the program really got me to look at my knitting with a much more critical eye and to be able to read my knitting. So now I was able to really look at it and see what I couldn't see before. And now once you see it, you can't unsee it. All I could do was look through, and I went back through my sweaters in my closet and I pulled out the ones I had knit. And I thought, oh my gosh, look at this. I have guttering here, or I have wobbly edge stitches here. But it was kind of shocking at one point, but it was also exciting because now I knew what to look for, and I knew what I needed to do to fix those things. So I could not wait to start casting on a project that I wanted to do and really put some of these things that I learned into practice, to look at my sweaters side by side and see the improvement with it.
Yeah. So then you had to resubmit the ones that got comments on them. How did you find the commenting? Was it, was that helpful or painful?
It was very detailed. I mean, they would give a very detailed report for every single swatch, good and bad. They pointed out all the things that you did well and all the things that you could watch for. And it wasn't always good and bad. There were some things that needed to be redone, and there were other things that they would just say, you might want to keep an eye on this, or, work on this. For example, with Stranded, when I had done Fair Isle, but none of my Fair Isle was actually very good. I pulled my floats were too tight, and so the fabric would pucker. And by doing the research and going through the program, I learned how to stretch my stitches out on the right needle, and how to knit inside out, and all these little things that I could do that really help with my overall tension. So I actually found the resubmits a piece of cake, because they're telling you what to do. If there's a swatch that you get hung up on and you just cannot figure it out, you get to a point where you just say, you know what, I'm going to send this in. I'm done. There's nothing else. Like, I can't knit it any more times. I think this is what they want. Here it is. This is my best attempt. If it's wrong, they'll tell me. And they do. They'll come back and say, this is not, you're off, or this is, but in their comments, they let you know what needs to be done. So it's so easy. You just redo the swatch with what they say, and you're good for the most part of classes. Yeah.
Okay. People tend to have a lot of anxiety about that submission process, being judged and having to redo it. And I think everyone's heard a nightmare story about someone having to resubmit 3 or 4 times. And I just think once we get to be adults, sometimes we have a hard time with criticism.
Not used to it anymore, right? I mean, it's been a long time since we were in school, and especially, I think honestly, the longer you've been knitting, the harder it is, because you start to think that you are pretty good. And while you may be able to knit everything, and while you may have been knitting for a long time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing it right. It just means you've figured out a way to do it. So that's why I think this is important, to sort of take a step back and relearn some of the better ways to do it. And there were so many things that I had done that I had picked up along the way. And since so many other knitters were doing it, I felt like I was right. But for example, like on the mattress stitch, I was going under 2 bars every time. And then when I started the program, in my references, everybody was saying to go under 1 bar on the left side and 1 bar on the right side. And I did it. When I did my sent in my piece, I did seem that way because I had researched it, and everything passed, which was great. But after I graduated through the program and I became a master knitter, I joined the committee, the review committee, for 2 years. And oh my gosh, I learned so much on the review committee, because it was not enough to just say that a swatch was wrong. You had to say why it was wrong. You had to be able to figure out what they did wrong. So a knitter thinks they've done it right. You look at it, it's wrong, but you need to bridge that gap. So it meant picking up needles and yarn and trying to recreate that mistake to figure out what they did to get it to look the way you're looking at it. And one thing that I found from being on the review committee is that so many knitters who had been doing this for a long time would do the swatches the way they knew. Then they would go back and throw in the references to satisfy the requirements. And when that happened, you could always tell, because the knitting didn't match the references, or the references were put in as an afterthought. What really works is when you do your research ahead of time, you get your references, and then you do what you've just learned, because first of all, you'll have your references, and second of all, it will match. And we would see that a lot. The references would say mattress stitch, go under 1 bar on the left, 1 bar on the right, but the knitter had gone under 2 bars because that's just the way they always did it.
Right.
And I think if this program's not for everyone. I think you need to have an open mind. You need to be willing to accept criticism. and have someone review your work, and you need to be able to work independently. So if you come in with the attitude that you know everything, you're just going to zip through it and get your certification, then it's a real blow when you get your first binder back and you realize you've got to do all of this work over again. Or there's some things that are very basic that they want you to redo. On the flip side, if you keep an open mind and you understand that this is a process, it's just between you and you. You're not competing with anybody else. You're not being judged against any other knitter. It is just you and the way you start and your knitting, how it looks, and the way your knitting looks when you're finished. And it's a personal growth. It is just you're elevating your own knitting skills. And if you have that mindset, then when you're doing your research, you've opened up your mind to learn so many new things, and it's exciting. And it is a wonderful journey when you're able to really get into your references instead of just using them to satisfy a requirement. You're really using them to learn.
Yeah, I'm notoriously stopped on the third swatch. I finished the third swatch, and that's sort of where my progress has ended. But I don't want to say ended, paused. But I have learned so much. I learned so much in those first 3 swatches that I do want to complete the program. And it's like you said, we're going to be talking later about an upcoming event that the Knitting Guild Association is putting on. And it's the second time. And the first time I learned a couple other things that I had been stressing out about that they sort of soothed my nerves. But one of the things you mentioned a moment ago was knitters learn ways to do things. They're not necessarily the best way to do something. And one of the things that came up in the conference was that when you end your swatch and you've bound off, you need to send the yarn through the final loop and pull it rather than just pulling the yarn out, just snipping it and pulling it through, which is how my mom taught me. And I just thought that was how, and I've done those 3 swatches that way where I just snipped it and pulled it through. It didn't even occur to me to look it up. Like, I just thought that was just how that was done. And of course, it makes sense now that I think about it. You need that last loop there to be a stitch as you're hemming or connecting pieces up. You need that one last piece. So it's like, oh, that makes sense. But it's like so many little things like that you don't even know you don't know until you start actually researching knitting rather than learning it as a piece of passed on knowledge where you're just sort of inheriting what comes to you.
Yeah. And there's so much that the program is really big on using reference books. And now, especially in the age of the internet, you learn very quickly that you cannot believe everything you see on the internet. Just because somebody comes out and looks confident and talks confident and does something and says very authoritatively, this is the way it is, it's not always the case. Yeah. So that's why they always want 2 references, because they want to have 2 people that are saying the same thing from different sources. And when I was going through the program, I would use one of my references for every question or swatch from Cast On, one of the Cast On articles. And then my second reference from someone else, the Hiatt book or another reference book that I was using as a backup. And you do learn. And that's the thing, like you said, there's so many, it's a matter of you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And these things aren't hard. It's just a matter of being shown, and the little light bulb clicks on and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so easy. It's not that you have to learn anything new. It's just, you're just being told.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Cast On. That is actually the publication that's put out by the Knitting Guild Association. And that's one of the resources that people can use as they're going through the program. Also, many of the people involved in the program, well, I know Arenda Holiday produces videos to help people see some of the things that they're looking for, and demonstrate some of the techniques as well. So that's a wonderful resource too for
And
people
Cast
who are
On
going
now
through.
is digital, which is so
Right.
awesome when you're going through the program, because before, if you wanted to go back and get on your way to the master's articles, you had to go back and actually buy past editions from the website. And it was like $14 for an old edition. Whereas now,
Wow.
I know you log in and you can look up the Cast On issues, but more effectively, I use the search bar, type in whatever topic you want, weaving in at yarn ends or whatever, and all of the articles will come up.
Right.
And it's an amazing resource because the technical articles are really, really good. They're all written by master knitters or co-chairs of the Master Hand Knitting Committee. And most of them are designed for the Master Hand Knitting program. All of the ones that are on your way to the master's articles they're designed and catered to a swatch or a project or something that you're going to be doing in the program.
If you are someone who is hearing this and you're thinking, no, I'm not interested in doing the actual program, your membership to the Knitting Guild Association gives you access to Cast On and all of those articles. So you can study on your own time. You can have access to those for your own personal references, aside from the Master Hand Knitter program. It's just wonderful resources.
It really is.
Like
I said, the Cast On, you have all the designs, but you have the technical articles too. And they're very in depth, which is nice. And it's an easy way to access it. Like you said, it just completely aside from the Master Hand Knitting program.
Yeah. It's a great resource. I had assumed that you started designing after you became a master hand knitter, but you mentioned that you were designing first before you decided to pursue it. So how did you get started in designing?
So I had started by, at first I would modify patterns that I would find a pattern that I liked, but then I said, well, I want to change this pattern and I want to put the neck bigger and I need to do the sleeves wider and I want to make it longer and I want to switch the pattern on the back, and I make all these changes. And then finally I said, why don't I just try to do this myself from the ground up? And I had an idea of something that I wanted to knit. And I looked through all of my knitting magazines. I went through all my Vogues and my interweaves and my books, and I couldn't find exactly what I wanted. So I thought, well, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to see if I can. And oh my gosh, I loved the whole process. But as I went through it, I realized there's so much more I need to learn. But I really, really loved all the aspects of designing. It's the creative part, it's the technical part with the numbers and Excel, and then the actual pattern writing and creating the schematics and the grading of the different sizes. There's just a lot of different hats that you wear as a designer that I found exciting. The timing honestly could not have been worse, because I wanted to design, but I also wanted to make sure that I was good and that I was doing it right. So I thought, well, let me sort of slow down my design aspirations for now and really focus on the master program. And I did the first level. It's 3 levels. The first one in about 6 weeks. I'm going to say 3 weeks, maybe a month before the review came back, the submission, the whole thing. Then my second level it took about 3 months to do that one. And then my third level was about 8 months, because that's the one where you need to design and knit a sweater, either an Aran sweater or a Fair Isle sweater. And whichever style you do for your sweater, you do the opposite for a hat that you knit. You design and you knit. So I did a cabled sweater and a Fair Isle hat. Cables are what I was stronger in, so I thought I'll do that for the sweater. People tend to do whatever they feel stronger in with their sweater, and then the Fair Isle with the hat. So on level 3, when I first started level 3, I had hurt my shoulder, so I wasn't able to knit in the beginning. So I really did all the written work, all of the reports, the questions, got my references for all the swatches lined up. So when I was able to actually go, I had all that stuff done. So that kind of kind of worked out well because it was a big chunk of work that was already done when I really technically started knitting on the project. But I was starting to design on the side. I had some calls out, and I was working with a couple of I had gotten a design. My very first design that was commissioned was Knit Now magazine out of England. And I was so excited, and I was working on that, but I was really ready to wrap up the master program at this point because, your mind is kind of already on to the next thing, but there's an awful lot of work in level 3. And so it was a balance. I made it work. I just pushed on through and got that taken care of. And then the minute I became a master knitter, I was like, oh, wait, fantastic. Was done. It's a big relief because there's so many restrictions around what you can knit. Certain types of yarn, they want light colored yarn that you can see clearly the stitches, nothing dark or fuzzy or heathery that will cover up mistakes. So when you're done, it's a liberating experience because now you get to knit whatever you want.
Right.
You still have all this knowledge in your head, but now you're free to go and just do all the things that you want to do.
So did you feel when you had finished your master hand knitter certificate, did you feel like there was an impact in your actual design process? Or do you think that it just made you a better knitter, or did it affect the designing as well?
It definitely affected the design because a big part of level 3 is design pattern writing. And my co-chair at that time was the tech editor for Cast On. So it was something that she was very zeroed in on. She was very tough, but I was appreciative of that because it really made my patterns much better. And it was nice to be able to write out so many patterns in level 3 and have people go through them and not only critique the technical part of, but also give you advice on how you can maybe word something better or how you can make it simpler. Or, for example, instead of saying knit 1 stitch, blah, 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 working pattern to the end, knit 1. And then on row 2, wrong side row, purl 1, working pattern to the end, purl 1. You can cut all that out and just say maintain your first and last stitches and stockinette stitch for selvage and work in pattern. So there's a lot of ways you can take a very wordy pattern and really trim it down. And when you can do that, when you can explain what needs to be done in less words, it's less fatiguing for the knitter. They're able to get what they need to do without having to read so much. And, when you think about patterns not that long ago, they were much more cryptic than they are now. You'd have a column and a half in Vogue magazine for the whole pattern, including the schematic. And that was it. It would tell you to decrease 1 stitch at each end. It wouldn't tell you which decrease to use or where to place those decreases. You would need to know to do a make 1 left and a make 1 right, for example, if you wanted to create a balanced set of decreases. And you'd need to know to place those 1 stitch in from the edge for your selvages so that you could seam it properly. But the pattern wouldn't tell you that. Now patterns can be 8, 9, 10 pages, and they tell you every little thing. So it's good. I think beginner and intermediate knitters like that. I'm finding that knitters who are experienced don't. They don't want all of those words. They just want to know what to do. They'll figure it out. They'll move on. So I think that the amount of writing that goes into a pattern definitely differs based on the skill level of the pattern. And that's something that the program helped you to realize is, who are you knitting for? Is this a beginner pattern or a complex pattern? And then changed your pattern writing style based on that.
Yeah, there definitely has been a dramatic shift in the length of pattern sizes. And I think just because of the internet, really, people can just have a digital copy. And so they're not worried about it being 8 or 12 or 15 pages long because it doesn't matter. They can just scroll. But I definitely am one of the people at this point in my knitting where, as you say, I'm like, just get to the point. Just tell me what I need to do. Don't need all these pictures. I don't, but everybody's at different levels. So I can understand that too. You have an impressive number of designs on your website. Do you want to give us your website information real quick? I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Thank you. It is DonnaEstinDesigns.com. You can also just type in DonnaEstin.com. That'll get you there too.
Are your master hand knitter designs on there? Are they the pattern in the pattern?
There's a Northern Girl Fair Isle Tam. That was my level 3 project. And the Nor'easter pullover was my level 3 Aran sweater.
I'm very drawn to the Northern Girls Fair Isle Tam pattern. I have this open right now. I am on a blue and orange kick at the moment. So
I am too. It's like my thing. And it's not just blue and orange. There's like 15 million shades of blue and 15 million shades of orange. And all of it with the white, it just looks so clean and yeah.
Okay. The Nor'easter pullover pattern is gorgeous. This is absolutely beautiful. You even have cable that travels around the neckline. That is lovely.
Yeah, I made the neckline wider than you normally would so that I could fit a braid around the neck and then a turtleneck that moved out from that, just in ribbed.
That's lovely. I feel like this is way more than I would have thought to put into a sweater design for the hand knitter program.
Well,
like above and beyond.
There's the Knitting Guild also has a Pinterest board where you can go and look at the master knitters, or actually it's on the website too. You can go and look at we just started doing this like 3 years ago. So you've got 20, 21, and 22, but you can look at their projects and it gives you a lot of ideas of different elements, maybe things you hadn't thought of. I personally don't really like baubles. So, but you have to put them in. So I thought, oh gosh, where am I going to put these? I have to satisfy the requirements. I don't want to get it, but I also don't want a sweater that I'm not going to wear. So I found a way to just sort of put them in there without having them be too all over the place. So, everybody's got their own little quirks and their own little things that they want and don't want. And that's why it's kind of nice, I think, to go through and look at what other people have done, because it does give inspiration into ideas.
That must be such a treat to be one of the people who looks at the level 3 work, and to open the submissions and see what people have come up with.
It is, because, you think you look at so many of these over and over and over that you've seen it all, and you don't. And I think that's what's so interesting about design is that everybody brings their own likes and dislikes, their own experiences, their own flair for fashion into it. And there's, people, what you create came from your mind and nobody else's. And so I'm always impressed by some of the different design elements or the way people will lay out a sweater or a hat or come up with the coloring. And it's just, there's an infinite number of designs out there, and it is exciting to go through and look at that, especially by the time you get to level 3. There's a lot more leeway with cast-ons and bind-offs, and the stitch patterns are a lot more fun. And I had done entrelac before, I had done brioche before, and slip stitch, but the program helped me to really master it. So when I had done entrelac, I just didn't really like the way it looked when I was done. But having gone through the program, I'm like, well, now I get it. Now I know why I've got gaps in between my squares and little holes here and there. And I know how to fix it. So I left level 3 and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do it all. I want to try everything. I want to go back and do an entrelac sweater. I want to go back and do more brioche, because now I have all these things I can try that work and I can compare them. And people tend to do what we're good at when you get to where you're good at something. And that's one thing that the program gets you to, where you feel very confident in what you're doing, then you want to keep doing it. You want to just keep doing it over and over and over. And it just sort of increases that enthusiasm for knitting. I found, it does teach you how to read your knit, and it does make you have a more critical eye. But if it's going to help you in the end to be more excited and more passionate about knitting, then that's a good thing. And it pushes you out of your comfort zone. Like I said, I gravitated towards cables. This said, great, you can do cables, but you have to also do all this other stuff, and you also have to do it well. So that was really good for me. I still, gravitate back to cables now, but not as much. I feel like I've got a more of an open repertoire, and that feeds into my design. Before I was thinking of designs with a much narrower lens, whereas having gone through the program, there's so much out there. There's so much that you can do. There's things that you can do that have never been done before. And that's what I think is exciting, is to take all of this knowledge that you have, sort of wipe a clean slate, and then start from scratch and see what designs you can come up with at that point.
Are there any other designs that you are especially proud of, or that really make your heart sing, I guess I would ask?
I just finished up the Druid's Guernsey for men, which is again cables, which I really like. I had done a Tillman's men cardigan, which had an option for either buttons or zippers. And that one did really well. My experience with designing for men is the more traditional and classic, the better. I want to put all these trendy things in a men's sweater, and then my husband is like, oh, he's like, I don't think so. And the other, I've knitted for some other men, and they're just, in the family, and they tend to like what's a little bit more, traditional. So on the Druid Guernsey, I did use cables and moss stitch, but I did a little bit of creative things with the cables to kind of give it a little bit of different flair. So I like the way that one turned out. I like the Lillimore sideways sweater. It's a lightweight fingering yarn, so you can wear it in the house almost year round. It's really light, and it's worked sideways from cuff to cuff, almost in the round. There's 2 short seams that you need to seam under the arms, but everything else is done in the round seamless. Blackwater Mosaic Pullover. I really like a good set in sleeve. I think it fits well. It looks nice. And this one has mosaic on the bottom, and then stockinette at the top. So you've got a nice, clean, easy workspace to shape and seam your set in sleeve. So I've designed bottom up, top down, flat seamed or seamless or contiguous set in sleeves. And there's no one right or perfect way. I don't think there's any one style of construction that's better than another. It really depends on the stitch complexity, the weight of the yarn, the stitch pattern. Sometimes, in fact, the Druid is a really good example. I started doing a top down contiguous sleeve in the round seamless sweater. But when I started adding all these different cable panels to the different ones for the sleeves and the back and the front, and then I had a V-neck, there was so much stuff going on. I thought, you're gonna hate knitting this. So I said, let's just stop and change it to flat, where you're doing one piece at a time, and seam it, because it is, it's a worsted weight yarn with cables. So it's a little bit heavier. So it does benefit from having the seams. And so sometimes that happens, you have an idea of what you want, but it doesn't really work with all the elements. So you just sort of change it up and do it a little bit differently.
Yeah. Well, the back on that one's gorgeous. It makes me think of, like stained glass windows in a cathedral or something. It's lovely.
Thank you. I like designing designs that are very artistic, either contemporary or a new twist on the classics, and that are comfortable. I like the process of knitting. but I also like the finished product. I'm not one of these people that just wants to knit for the sake of knitting and then discard what I've done. I really want to love what I've knit. I want to, if it's socks or sweater, I want to wear them. I want to give them to people who will also get a lot of wear and use out of them too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm there with you on that one. So you now are a member of the board of directors for the Knitting Guild Association. Can you tell us about your position and the work that you're doing with them?
So I am the vice president of public relations, and I handle the social media. So I'm doing all of the Facebook, the Instagram, Twitter. We have a Pinterest. We have a Facebook group for the Master Hand Knitting Committee, although it is not just for the Master Hand Knitting Committee or for just a Master Hand Knitting program. We have close to 900 people that are in that Facebook group. It's if you are working on the Master Hand Knitting program at any of the levels, or if you're just thinking about it, honestly. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that are interested in the program and that joined the group to sort of get a feel, for what it's all about. It's sort of a little support group that people can ask questions or help each other out with. So I handled primarily the marketing aspect of it, which since the Knitting Guild became their own in 2016, Offingers was the management company that was managing the Knitting Guild up until 2015 and 2016, they took over. It's now being run by knitters for knitters. So it's just it's our own nonprofit. And it's really, we've got a lot of new ideas, a lot of things that we were wanting to the virtual conference, the virtual guilds, really getting out there and connecting with people, having everything digital makes it much easier as well, I think, to stay connected with everybody for sure.
You also have 2 classes that you teach through the Knitting Guild Association. Can you tell us about those?
Yes. So the first one that I teach is how to market yourself within the knitting community or knitting industry. And it takes the framework of an educational and professional marketing program and it gears it towards the knitting world. And, you can be the best knitwear designer, tech editor, instructor in the world, but it doesn't matter if nobody knows about you. Mm. And that's what this program does. It helps you to create your own brand from the ground up. And it covers, you identify your target market, how to create content, some core marketing outlets and marketing opportunities analysis. And in the end, by the end of the course, you'll have created your own brand, your marketing tracking, your marketing plan, which is designed to be updated every year. So it's a document that you have that helps to guide your marketing, and it's very unique to your business. And then you update it every year, and it changes as you change. So it's a really exciting, there's so many different things you can do in the knitting world right now. And so it's really targeting anybody who's working in the knitting industry.
Mm-hmm. And I will throw out there that it's very affordable too for what is offered in the course.
You do need to be a member of the Knitting Guild to sign up, but then once you, but the membership right now is like $25 a year. So it's not a big deal. And then the marketing course is $150 for the whole course. So you sign up. As soon as you enroll, you can download all the materials. You work at your own pace. The marketing is very, very personal to your business. So you're not comparing yourself to anybody else. You're creating the image that you want to send out into the public in order to get more business to you. So once you're done with all of the materials, you email everything in, and then we work one-on-one back and forth with getting everything right. If you have any questions as you go through it, I'm just an email away. If once you prepare all the materials, I will help steer you into a direction that's going to be a little, sometimes you've just nailed it right off the bat. Sometimes there's some areas that you need some help in. And the goal is just to have you end up with a brand that is sellable and that you have a good strategy for going out there and getting more business. And that's really what we're all trying to do in marketing, is just to drive more business, to you.
And your other class?
The other one is it's a certification program. So it's like the Master Hand Knitting program, but it is a professional knitwear designer certification. And this one, whereas the Master Hand Knitting program is all about your knitting, this really is just about design. In fact, you don't knit anything except some swatches for the purpose of your design. So it prepares new designers for a career in knitwear design. It covers inspiration, technical skills, proper techniques. This one is broken down into 3 modules. So you sign up for module 1. Once you've passed that one, you can sign up for module 2. And then module 2, once you're finished with that, goes to module 3. And then at the end of the 3rd one is when you receive your certification for knitwear designer. And they're all 3 very different. The first one is formulating an idea, module 1. And this is taking the creative inspiration stage, your selection of stitch patterns, yarn, color, graphics, how to create schematics, how to find design calls, and prepare submissions for publications. The second level is building a design. And this one is really the nitty-gritty of design. So it goes through your measurements, gauge, grading through a wide range of sizes, calculating yardage, laying out your spreadsheets, shaping, allowances, formulas, all of that, really the details part of it, charting, writing out patterns, and so forth. And then the last one is on the business of design. And this one goes through yarn support, working with tech editors and publishers, and also third-party sellers, laying out a pattern, pricing, how to handle sales tax and VAT, setting up your business licenses, accounting, your contracts, rights, royalties, what to do when your rights revert back to you, customer relations, policies, copyright, all that kind of business stuff is in module 3.
That's amazing. That's really amazing that is included, because I feel like so many people are just sort of like, I don't know. What do you think? When they're trying to work out an agreement with someone, like what seems fair to you? And really, there are industry standards that can be brought into play.
Everybody is different. And I think sometimes just seeing it broken down, for example, the design fee, when you break it down per month, just something that some people don't quite think of up front. But once you start to see how and I think that's a big part of it. When you're just starting, you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know anything. So whatever someone pitches to you, you're like, okay.
Right. Yeah.
Fine. But there's so much, when the pandemic first started in 2000, everything sort of slowed down and it's all picking back up again. And so we're seeing more and more design calls than ever that are coming out. And I think having so many publications be digital too has just really opened it up. So there's a lot of work out there, and this program just helps you navigate, especially module 3. Make sure that you're making the best decisions for you, because we're all different and we all have different ideas of what we want in this.
Coming up in April, there is an online event for folks who are interested called the Next Level Knitting Conference. Can you tell us what that is and what people can expect from it?
Yes. So we used to years ago have what we called Master's Day, and it was a live in-person event, maximum of 50 people, and all the courses were geared towards the master's program. We have taken that concept and changed it. Now it is a 3-day virtual course. This is awesome because we are able to reach our worldwide base of members. And we have people right now from 11 different countries that are signed up, and all different time zones. And it really is a great way to sort of bring in everybody. The courses I would say a little over half are still geared towards the master's program, but you don't need to be in the master's program to benefit. There are basic knitting techniques and classes that all knitters can benefit from. But in addition, we've added extra classes for master knitters. If you've already become a master knitter, you don't really want to go through these again. There's classes on design. There's classes on techniques that maybe aren't covered in the program. as well as classes geared towards beginner knitters who haven't signed up for the program yet. So it's a much wider range, targeting knitters of all different skill levels. What I really like about the format, we've got over 20 different classes, and you'll have time to take, say, a live class Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. So that's 4 live classes that you can take. And by live, I mean that when the class starts, you are at home on your computer, you go in through a link and you can watch, you can ask questions through chat. We don't have the capability of asking live just because there's so many people at these. And, if you've ever taken an online class and you've got people asking questions, you know how it can get kind of tedious when you've got that one person that's, asking questions every 10 seconds, and it kind of derails the teacher. Right. So we found that this format really works well because the questions come through chat. We have a moderator that will ask the instructor the questions. The instructor can answer, but she is also able to keep the class moving. Mm-hmm. And then any questions that are not answered during the class, we answer them at the end, and we'll get the information to you. So that's considered participating in a live class. You're also able to go back and rewatch all of these classes for up to 6 months. So you can see all 20 classes if you want. If we tell people that it's good to pick the 4 that you're the most interested in to do live, but then you can go back and you can watch those again, or you can watch the other classes. So you have time over 6 months to go back and catch up on everything. And some people who are working in the program, there's a couple classes that they'll watch and rewatch and pause and go back and look to see, because some of the knitters are the instructors are committee members, co-chairs are actually doing some of the techniques that you're going to be doing in your swatches. So it's a really nice way to sort of pause and replay and really, really understand what you're doing. The cost right now is only $100 for the conference, and that's good till March 31st. It goes up April 1. That's when our early bird pricing ends. It goes up to $150. So, and it's going to be April 22nd through the 24th.
Right, which is a Friday through Sunday.
Right. But you really don't need to even be here on those dates. We've had a few people that have signed up that are not even going to be in town, but they want to be able to watch it in May, June, July, whatever. So
yeah, that's my situation this time. Unfortunately, it lines up with 3 things that I have to be at on those 3 days. So I plan to sign up and watch later this time. But I did want to reiterate that it was incredibly helpful to have access to this experience last year when it went online, because being able to ask some questions of the instructors and committee members really helped sort of ratchet down my worry about participating in the program and how I was going to be judged and what happened if I did something wrong. And I could tell that my fellow attendees, we all just sort of, our shoulders got away from our ears again. And we just felt a little more free about the process. Again, for someone who's like not used to having to deal with criticism as an adult, it can be very stressful to have to put yourself out there. But they really explained how the experience works and how the critiquing works. And the one thing that really helped me to calm down was someone asked a question like, well, what if I do something wrong on all of the swatches? Do I have to reknit all of the swatches? And the person who was taking the question says, no, we'll just point that out to you. We might have you do 1 or 2, but you don't have to redo all 19 swatches. We're not here to torture you.
That's the thing. They want to make sure that you understand and that you know, but it's not so rigid. And everybody who's a co-chair on the committee was in your same shoes at one point.
Right.
So they've all gone through the program themselves. If you do something wrong on one of your tail weaves, if you weave in your tails wrong, you're going to do it wrong on all of them because that's the way you think it should be done. So they'll ask you to redo one and just to show that you can weave in your tail weaves properly. And that's it.
Yeah. it's not as scary as it might feel.
Oh, it's not.
And it is.
And the co-chairs are really nice. I know every one of them, and their whole, everyone is a volunteer, and they're really doing this because they want to help other people improve their knitting. They really are there to help. If they weren't, if they're burned out or whatever, they just quit. I mean, they move on and they find someone else. So the ones that are there because they want to be there. So
And that, I mean, you mentioned that actually helped too, to be able to see the people and to, get to know them a little bit rather than it being like an anonymous committee. That sort of helped as well, like, oh, they're human.
Right. Not quite as intimidating. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the conference this year. I think it's going to be, we've got a big variety of classes, and oh my gosh, the sponsors, we have so many amazing sponsors in the knitting industry who have donated yarn and books and tools. And we've got great gift baskets and giveaways and digital certificates. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much, Donna, for taking the time today. Do you want to just sort of go through all the ways people can contact you real quick? And I'll have it in the show notes, but go ahead and tell us too.
Well, I'm on Ravelry as Donna Estin. I'm on Instagram, Donna Estin Designs, Facebook, also Donna Estin Designs. My website is, again, Donna Estin Designs or donnaestin.com. And you can email me at donnaestindesigns@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter. So we'll talk. I'm still there, but I'm not, it's not something that I check a lot. I'm on Pinterest also. So, but thank you so much, Anne, for having me on your program. I really enjoy what you're doing for the knitting world. And it was a pleasure to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you. Many thanks to Donna for taking the time for an interview. You heard me gushing a bit about Donna's lovely designs. She contacted me after our interview to offer you all a coupon code to her website and Ravelry store for 25% off. The code is Thought I Knew How in all caps. I will include links to her Ravelry page and website, as well as all the other ways you can find her and the Knitting Guild Association online. And remember that if you are interested in attending the Next Level Knitting Conference online from April 22nd through 24th, 2022, or in having access to the classes during the 6 months afterwards, the $100 early bird price is good through March 31st. Thanks again, Donna. A few more things before I go. Jana Knits and I are halfway through hosting the Hap Shawl Knit Along. I have loved seeing your progress pictures in the Purl Together Ravelry group and on Instagram. My blue and pink version of the cowl is coming along nicely. I am pacing myself on this one so that it takes me the whole month. But if you are late and still want to join in, you do actually still have time. It's an addictive knit that can go fairly quickly if it's the only thing you're working on. There are completion prizes and participation prizes available. Learn more in the associated threads on the Purl Together Ravelry group. Secondly, there are many people who are interested in knitting or crocheting for charity, but they don't know where to donate their goods. Maybe the local police department is already swimming in knit bears and the local NICU has more hats than they can store. There is a website called justserve.org that maintains a list of charities who are looking for volunteers. On their homepage, you can enter your zip code or address to see what local charities need help, or you can click the box below the address field that says volunteer remotely. If you choose that option, you will receive a list of charities who accept remote work or donations mailed from elsewhere. There are many groups there who are looking for folks to knit, crochet, and sew items. Have a look, see if something resonates with you. Again, the address is justserve.org and choose the link that says volunteer remotely. Okay, everyone, that's it for now. I hope that you have a lovely rest of your month and that March goes out like a lamb for all of us listening here in the Northern Hemisphere. I will see you again in 2 weeks. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you'd like to support the show, please visit patreon.com/IthoughtIKnewHow to make a monthly pledge. You may also consider making a purchase from one of our sponsors by visiting the website ithoughtIknewHow.com and clicking the link at the top that says Be a Booster. While you're on the site, you can also find the show notes for each episode. Thank you ever so much to my patrons, to Knit New Haven, and to Morehouse Farm for sponsoring the podcast. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.